But we can't wait for Hollywood to be converted, and then they will have different worldviews, and then they will make different stories that we can support. We can't wait for that. We have to kind of learn the craft and produce more stories for our children.
Hello and welcome to another Parousia Podcast. I'm Charbel, your host. Very excited to have with me live from the United States the author of this book, J.C. Prins. She's a fiction author, and this book here, The Secret Princess, A Tale of Hope. This is a fiction book, but with some great a great storyline, but there's going to be some underlying Catholic themes we're going to talk about, and hopefully you'll be able to see what they are. JC, how are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning to you. So I know
That's right. It's morning over here in Australia. So is it evening or afternoon for you over where you are?
It's early evening here. So
Okay.
it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you very much for having me. It was also wonderful to get to meet you in person when you and your whole crew were here doing the tour. That was wonderful to hear you all speak live, and that was really great. So I just also want to say thank you for coming all that way. So
thank you so much. Thanks for joining us that night. We met, for those who don't know what you're talking about, we met at our Parousia USA tour, and we met specifically in Steubenville at the St. Paul Center, which is it's still a brand new building. It's not even been a year yet, and it was such an honor to be able to speak there and meet all the great team at St. Paul Center. But then we had a bit of time before I gave the presentation to talk about and meet each other, and that was great. And so thank you for coming out. And
it was wonderful. So, and again, great to be with you
here. You know my story. You know my story now. And I was wondering, for those, I mean, this is great. Congratulations, by the way. Won awards as well. So
thank you.
This is fantastic. Just this year as well, the seal of approval from the Writers Guild as well, the Catholic Writers Guild.
Yes.
It's got award-winning. It's an award-winning book. So congratulations. And I'm excited to dive into this. Before we dive into this, is it okay if we dive into who J.C. Prins is? And
of course,
I guess leading into what inspired you to do this. So can we go back to the beginning a little bit? Who is J.C. Prins?
So I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii. The short version is that my dad likes to surf and my mom doesn't like to be cold. So that's how we ended up in Hawaii. My dad is from Sri Lanka and my mom is from the Midwest of the United States. And I grew up in a good kind of grace before meals, Mass on Sunday, Catholic family. We were very faithful to those practices. But I think looking back, the biggest grace, one of the big graces in my life growing up was that my Nana in Sri Lanka, who I only met a handful of times because she was very far away, but she prayed the rosary for us individually every day. And that brought a tremendous amount of grace and protection to my family. I'm really, really grateful for that. And one of the other nice things that happens to me, I was very blessed to get to go to the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana, for college. And I know there's another Notre Dame in Australia, so this is the one in Indiana. And there I started going to daily mass. I started learning how to pray the rosary, the Divine Mercy Chaplet. I got confirmed there actually. And really the faith became the most important part of my life. And it just infuses every aspect of my life, and including my writing. So that's it. My faith journey isn't terribly complicated, but it's very, very central to my life and my worldview.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. It is so interesting. You have a mix right there, a Sri Lankan and an American, but brought up in Hawaii right there, which is fascinating. But I love how I mean Notre Dame, or we would say in Australia Notre Dame. So interesting. So Notre Dame University. Yes, I got my master's degree there in Sydney.
Oh, wonderful.
And, so
you got to get the Indiana accent going for Notre Dame in Indiana.
That's right. Now, tell me, were you always into, were you writing? Were you always, what led you into writing, fiction stories? And I guess, was that did that become a career path of yours, or were you doing other things and then you discovered it? How did that happen?
So I think looking back, I always used to enjoy stories. I used to make up my own stories. I think I wanted to be a writer, but I couldn't. I'm not an outliner, and I somehow thought since I can't outline, I can't be a writer. So I went into medicine, as one does when one can't outline. By the way, that's you do not have to be able to outline to be a fiction writer. That just, but that was something I didn't know at that time. But I would say about 5 years or so ago, I started getting back into creative writing just as a hobby. A couple of years ago on a trip, I went on a pilgrimage to Medjugorje, and I really felt on my heart that Our Lady was asking me to start writing Catholic work kind of for our community. And that's kind of what led me to start writing my first book, The Secret Princess. So I think now would be maybe a good opportunity to talk a little bit more about what that is. I at the time listened to a lecture and read a work called The Golden Key by George MacDonald. I think depending on who you ask, he's either the father or the grandfather of modern fantasy. He wrote a lot of works. His work, Phantastes, was really instrumental in C.S. Lewis's conversion. He read it on a train, and later he says that my imagination was baptized, and the rest of me just took a little while to kind of catch up. So that fiction that really changes someone, that leaves them more open to the reality of God and faith, is something that he really kind of was a prime example of. He also was a heavy influence on Tolkien, and so that reading that book really inspired me in a lot of ways to kind of help me get into this space to write The Secret Princess. The Secret Princess, I'm calling it Catholic fantasy, but it's probably better described as mystical realism, because it still has, it's set in kind of like a fairy tale medieval world, but there's the Catholic Church. They go to Mass. There's devotion to the Eucharist, devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus are kind of woven into the story. And I think that one of the things that I wanted to do, I know a lot of times, C.S. Lewis is very famous for talking about like he wanted his work to steal past the watchful dragons of religious inhibition. So there's Aslan, there's Narnia, there's not kind of overt Christianity, but I kind of wanted to move beyond that and say, if we already, it's a book for our Catholic children. A lot of the children I've met, and looking back on my own life, a lot of children really care about their faith. They believe in God. And if you already start with the faith is accepted, I'm finding it's very interesting the other creative places that can be gone to if you don't have to use all of your creative kind of writing tricks to kind of subtly talk about the faith without talking about the faith.
Yeah.
And not to say that that's not very important. It was just something that this was just an area I was kind of interested in writing. So I'm interested in looking at sort of visualizing things visualizing unseen realities. So in this world, all of the women have lockets. They're born with these wooden lockets, and inside there's flowers and they're birds, and they kind of represent the state of somebody's heart. So in the main character, her name is Miriam. She's a 10-year-old girl, and they've just ended a fictional war where her father has died. And when her mother found out that her father had died, her locket fell to the ground and broke, and the bird inside flew away, and she keeps it tied with twine. And Miriam's locket didn't break, but it stopped growing as it should. And the other person who lives within their home is her grandmother. So her father's mother, who's unfortunately just a really nasty person, and her locket is iron. It doesn't open. But thankfully, there is another woman in the story. One of their neighbors is a woman named Lena, she has an intact locket with a bird and a beautiful flower in it. And she loves to tell Miriam stories. And it really kind of is nurturing Miriam's locket back to life. And the rosebud inside Miriam's locket is initially very shriveled, but hearing the stories, it's kind of inspiring to kind of come back to life. And so exploring just ideas of not only faith, but also growing and during times of trial, forgiveness, kind of hope. Those are kind of the themes of the story. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, but that, thank you. I just before I continue
Mhm.
is I mean you mentioned both Tolkien and C.S. Lewis who are probably I mean known multi-generationally known now globally, but the name of the other author you just said that was it
Mhm.
that inspired Tolkien, what was it that
Yeah,
their name again?
George MacDonald. So
And
he wrote
same
the
time, was he around that time?
I think he's in 1850. He's earlier.
Okay. I'm
But
just
he was a
amazed
very
what that era produced.
Yes. Yeah, it's really remarkable. And those giants, are never going anywhere, and we are forever
No.
indebted to them. But I also feel like it's okay for us to also start growing beyond them and not be limiting ourselves to. We can only write epic fantasy because that's what the Lord of the Rings was. If you want to
Yeah.
write, if people want to write epic fantasy, that wonderful, go for it. But I just do think there's room for other stories of faith to start kind of moving beyond that and adding to that body of work.
Absolutely, totally agree.
So
This is beautiful. So I noticed right away, just this is the book we're talking about, the Secret Princess, Tale of Hope, and you've got the chapters there. You've got images in here. But can I just start? Or how you? I mean, you've dedicated the book for your mum.
yes, my
And you passed
parents.
down. Yes, this is and dad,
So,
and then and this is great. They pass down love stories, and your dad who buys you books, new boots, all these. Are they
that's
books
a
or
reference.
boots?
It's a reference to a scene in the book. So
Okay, there you go. And then you start off with the Our Father. I mean, it's right there. That's your first page, and then you dive into chapter one. But what's interesting is as you read, and you were describing the character, and you've got imagery right here. So I just want to make sure people can see. Um, you've got some beautiful images throughout this book, and I wonder did you decide with the imagery that was something you added on later, or you had this idea from the beginning? I want to make sure that these basic images as you're writing something like this.
I wanted it to be illustrated. At the time, God's been very generous with a lot of divine appointments. I had no idea I would be able to work with the caliber of artists that I ended up working with. Her name is Maria. She's a Ukrainian artist, and she just really created some lovely pictures they're all hand painted watercolor pictures. So I was really thrilled. I think it adds a lot to the story. But on top of that, it was also nice to be able to add an appendix with the First Friday Sacred Heart prayers. So that I just it is a very overtly Catholic book. But the first and foremost is my goal was to make it an entertaining and engaging story. That was the goal. So I'm really pleased. It's been very well received. A lot of the kids who have read it have really loved it. And again, it was given the Catholic Writers Guild seal of approval, and it won Best Debut Novel at the Catholic Media Association Awards. But the kids who are pestering their grandmothers or their parents for the sequel that I'm still working on is the greatest thing that I treasure. So
Wow. Well, I love. So can we just just to help I guess whet the appetite of the listener and viewer here. I mean, right away we're in chapter one. You've given a bit of an outline there of the main character. But we have introduction right there. I'm just looking at this image, the image of her when Jesus, what looks to be Jesus with a Sacred Heart, obviously there, is introduced very early on. So can you tell us how this comes about? What's the role that I guess Jesus is playing in this story?
So the stories that the woman Lena tells to the main character Miriam, they do have Jesus in them, and they're not really something that it's. I think that the meaning and the takeaway messages of the story aren't just something that I kind of was like, I want people to kind of take away this message from the story. A lot of it is based on some of my own kind of meditations and things that I've gotten in prayer that just have really powerful images. But they feature Jesus, and then Miriam interacts with the stories, and there's a statue of the Sacred Heart kind of in their church that's also an important part of the story. But the Lord is present. It was very one of the things I had to decide early on was whether or not I was going to put the name of Jesus in my book. And I decided I was going to do that and make it Catholic, not just kind of vaguely Christian. And I was surprised at how hard that was. Yes, that's the statue in her church. I was surprised at how hard that was, even for someone who loves daily mass and loves the rosary. But I was happy that I took that step to make it, to take a stand and make it truly a Catholic book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's continue then. So she's been told these stories, more beautiful imagery here, and the viewers who are viewing this can see this. Those who are listening on the podcast platforms have to get the book and to see this. But can you tell us a bit about how, I guess now, where does the story go?
So a lot of it is to do with the healing of the heart, which is both of Miriam's mother and Miriam herself. And that happens through stories, but also her mother meets somebody new and just begins to repair her own locket as part of falling in love. And Miriam is trying to kind of see who she's going to believe. Is she going to believe Lena, or is she going to believe her grandmother? And really, at the core, it's a story of whether or not Miriam is going to choose to be a hopeful person. And I think for the most part, that's what particularly girls, they have to, particularly in this day and age, that's the choice at that age. They're not going to get bitten by a radioactive spider and turn into a superhero on a Marvel show. They really need to decide, am I going to choose to be a hopeful person or not? And so that's really at its core kind of what the story is about. So it does have a surprise ending, so I don't want to give it away.
No, absolutely. But again, right throughout, some beautiful imagery, right throughout. Look, it just continues. And great job. I can see a bit.
I'm very, very blessed to have found the artist that I did. The Lord really led me to some great people between my editors and my illustrator. I was really, really blessed with the team he's assembling for me. Writing a book is very much a team sport, I'm finding. So I'm just grateful.
Yeah.
So
and
don't go too far. Don't go too far on the pictures. Don't give away the ending.
No, I'm not giving away the ending. I won't do that. But I do want to show it is 6 chapters. It's not super long, so it's an easy read for people. We're talking about just over 100 pages
yes.
in total, but that's including the appendix at the end, so the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and so there is that. The prayers, the litany. You've got the consecration. You've even got the promises of the first Fridays. Fantastic. So even it's something there, even for everyone. The age group that you're aiming for, what would you say? What's the range? This is.
I would say 8 years old and up. And I do know that some boys have enjoyed it. It's not solely for girls. My godson really and his brothers really enjoyed it. But it is about women, and I think it would resonate most with girls. So I would say anybody who has ever been an 8-year-old girl. But I also know some people have had it read to them, kind of girls a little bit younger, that they have enjoyed it as well. But I would say 8 and up. So it would make a good Christmas gift, good first communion gift, I'm hearing. That's kind of what I'm hearing from folks. But I've been very pleased with the response from people of all ages.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, we certainly need hope today, and we're in a world where a lot of people have lost hope, and so this character does really instill that. When you read this, and you can journey with that, and without giving the end away, but the very good read, very simple read, and it does definitely stimulate the imagination in a big way. Can I ask? I mean, you do look at this. You made it Catholic. You got obviously some symbols, although it's not just for Catholics; it's for anyone who wants to read it. But the idea and the power of being a fiction writer and the methodology, like so, writing fiction books. Just I know you and I we've chatted about how effective that could be for evangelization. Why do you believe that? What is the importance of fiction today?
So so one of the things that really struck me, there's a section on the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops website. It's called Outreach to the Unaffiliated. No, Bishop Barron is very involved in this and has talked about it a lot. And they cited a Pew Research study of 2009. And among the terrible, horrifying statistics, the one that really jumped out at me the most was the median age, so the middle age that people said that they had stopped identifying as Catholic was 13. So that's the middle age, which means some people decided earlier than that they no longer identified as Catholic. And when you think about the wonderful programs that are happening, some people are doing fantastic work, but I always have in the back of my mind after that statistic, would this resonate with a 8 to 12-year-old kid? And most of the time, that's not really their target age group. But they are kind of reading stories. And I think in a lot of ways, what can be summed up is what is happening is we have lost the narrative. I think there's a pretty famous story. I think it's out of Canada, a Canadian family that the parents had this large farm and they had a number of sons, and their dream was to work the land as a family and pass on the farm to the sons. And one by one, each son went off to sea to become a sailor. And finally, only the mother and father were left on the farm. And one day they were just sitting around their kitchen table, lamenting grieving the loss of this dream and wondering, like, what happened? How did this happen? And all of a sudden, at the same time, they just both looked up and looked at the picture. It was like a $5 print they'd bought at Woolworths, and they'd hung it over their kitchen table that their boys ate all their meals at. And it was this majestic ship with billowing sails cresting the waves. And that picture had unintentionally just captured all of their sons' imaginations. And it's kind of a sad story. It's a poignant but sad story. But when we apply that to a lot of the parents whose dream is to pass on the Catholic faith, the most precious thing we have, and all of their kids have left the church, it becomes a really tragic story of, like, they're wondering, how did this happen? And it's a tragedy with potentially eternal consequences. And I think that we have to kind of look at that to say, when we go back to C.S. Lewis's Watchful Dragons quotes, there's a lot of other things that are slipping past the Watchful Dragons, or in a sense, like guardians, sometimes without even kids even really being aware of that, and thinking about it. And I think that the stories we absorb, or kind of we immerse ourselves with, that those carry messages. Those are written by people with worldviews, not necessarily with evil intent at all. Sometimes it can be problematic, but there is something that is capturing the imagination of people that is leading them away from the faith, and out into the world and just away from the Catholic faith. I think there is it's a very popular quote from Dostoevsky: "Beauty will save the world." I remember there was a talk I went to. It was a Theology on Tap talk I went to by an artist a couple of years ago, and he was arguing that, as beautiful as that quote is, that he thought there was another Dostoevsky quote that was more accurate about beauty. And I have it. So, "The awful thing is that beauty is mysterious as well as terrible. God and the devil are fighting there, and the battlefield is the heart of man." That's from the Brothers K. And I do agree with him that is more accurate. Beautiful things do not always lead to truth and goodness. Madison Avenue uses beauty to sell stuff. Their beauty, I think, is in many ways neutral. And I think we need to get back to what can be done to to participate more in in inspiring our children's imaginations with good things and with the Catholic faith. Like one of the things that was important to me about writing a mystical realism is to inspire wonder without turning to like magic and the occult. And things like that. If you ask, I think we're relatively the same age. If you ask people our age in America, like what is the greatest TV show ever made, a lot of them will say Breaking Bad. That is a impeccably written career performance by Bryan Cranston. That the execution level on that story is the bar, and it's about a decent man who became an evil man. And so, these are the things that are the stories that, and it's really, unfortunately, only gone downhill. People, I think that natural law is disappearing from our stories. Happy endings are disappearing from stories because it's not realistic. But I think that I feel really passionate about happy endings because there's something about the gospel. It's hard to preach the gospel that when we die, we will go to heaven and live happily ever after with God. If there's no happy endings and everything just promotes kind of depression and nihilism. So I think that things like that, and not to say like happy endings have to be earned. So just in a story as in life. So what do happy endings cost? They cost conversion, they cost forgiveness, kind of self-sacrifice. Like all of those things need to be incorporated to have a happy ending, like be authentic. But those are the things that I think are really important to kind of recapture. And I don't think that I think praying for Hollywood's conversion is wonderful. I know a lot of people do that, but we can't wait for Hollywood to be converted, and then they will have different worldviews, and then they will make different stories that we can support. We can't wait for that. We have to kind of learn the craft and produce more stories for our children. So I think one of your recent guests, is it Salome? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it.
Yes.
He was the comedian who wrote those two lovely children's books.
Exactly.
And one of the things he was saying at the end was just encouraging people to kind of step forward, use their talents to do something good for the faith and for our communities. And I would second that. So I think it's important.
Powerful stuff. What you're saying, amen. So good. You've said some real powerful things, very, very important for us to sort of unpack. Like, we've lost the art of storytelling. We've lost the idea of what beauty is. We've lost how to present it. The target audience of 8 to 12. It's so true. We don't have many resources that aim at that. The 8 to 12-year-old, and why not? Because if by 13 they're saying that they've left the faith, we should be absolutely targeting that. And it's true. It's sort of typically the 8-year-old, that's Holy Communion age, up until in America at least, and in at least in the Western rites in most countries and most in the Roman Rite, confirmation is between 12 and 14 years old. I mean, that sort of age. So you've got that window between Holy Communion and confirmation. That is vital. It's vital. And wow,
I've done some work with a confirmation program at one of my old parishes, and a lot of the kids, it felt like it was graduating from Catholicism. It was checking the box, and then you wouldn't have to go to Mass anymore. So I even think that is too late. I think it needs to be earlier, and that means engaging kids where they are, which is fiction. We are storytelling creatures. So I think that's very much an underutilized tool in the new evangelization.
Absolutely. Amen. This is now the reaction. Could you give us a bit of feedback? I mean, obviously you won an award, but just the reaction and the feedback you're getting. Like some people are saying this is a great holy gift for Holy Communion, but what are other people that what are they saying? What's the sort of different feedback you're getting for this?
I think my favorite one was one of my friends gave it to her granddaughter, who just loved it and kept on pestering her to like, it's book one, like where's book two? You have to get it for me right now.
Yeah.
And I think the reaction that I think is telling is I wrote this book for them. I wrote this book mainly for Catholic kids, but in a lot of ways for Catholic girls. And I think it
Mm.
resonates with them to have a book that's for them. I know the one I'm working on now it's for a little bit older. It's probably kind of 12 and up. It's
Okay.
set it's the same. It's a sequel. It's going to be focusing
Okay.
like on the Rosary and the Divine Mercy, not the Divine Mercy tablet, the Rosary, the Holy Spirit, Marian consecration, and exploring things of like, why does God allow evil and what identity do you live out of? So try to a little bit of an
Wow.
ambitious project for my sophomore novel.
Yeah.
But it's the feedback I've gotten from them is that it's really resonating, and that this one is resonating out with boys. But again, I'm writing it for them. So I think that's one of the nice things about the state of publishing. Like I'm independently publishing just because I prefer to keep control over my artwork and my editorial team and things like that. But that does allow the capacity for us to write to a niche audience. We don't have to write something that would appeal to 5 million people. And that's the only reason that a big publishing house would pick it up. Like I can write something kind of, and other people can write for kind of our community, our Catholic community. And I, by no means, there's Catholic writers who have written numerous more books who've been doing this much longer than I have. But I would suspect that they would also agree that we really just need more people willing to write anything, whatever they're inspired to write from a Catholic worldview. And that would be a great help.
Wow. Very well said. Very well said. Are you seeing, I mean, I'm certainly coming across, I guess, children's books, but not fiction. Many teaching the faith, lots of Bible stories, but very few in the fiction space. So this would be, I mean, are you in your network, are you starting to see, are there others? Is this inspiring other people, other authors to want to, go down that road?
I don't know that I'm personally inspiring other people. I hope that something is inspiring people and empowering them to do that. I think that there's something particularly about fiction that's really important in terms of I think that kids can actually handle quite a high degree of complex theology if you make it concrete in a story and not super abstract. An example I will give you is one of my writing teachers in a group called The Habit. His name is Jonathan Rogers. He gave a talk. It was a talk called Men Without Chests, and he was making the argument that C.S. Lewis had The Abolition of Man, which is one of his philosophy texts, open while he was writing The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And you know, I was supposed to have read The Abolition of Man in my college intro to philosophy class. It was the last thing, but the only thing that I remember about it was my philosophy teacher's quip that the only reason we were reading this is you could not end an intro to philosophy class on Nietzsche. I do, however, remember Eustace Scrubs, who like almost deserved his name and called his parents by their first name, was kind of always looking around to be disagreeable. And on the other hand, Reepicheep, who was like always like ready to fight somebody, and he would lose at chess because he's like the knights just wouldn't behave in such a cowardly way. They would want to go and die. And so like I remember those things, those ideas that C.S. Lewis had in Abolition of Man, but I don't remember them. But I remembered them when he put them in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So I think that that fiction writers fictionalize things. And obviously C.S. Lewis is a master of fictionalizing his own ideas because he's also a brilliant philosopher. But I think that we can fictionalize anything. I will often, like, there'll be an idea of an homily or a talk I heard, and it would be like, that's a really, really powerful idea. And just finding a way to kind of like weave that into my story. Again, the storytelling principles, I think, are if I neglect the craft of storytelling, it's very, very easy to end up with propaganda, where it's like my characters are just little puppets, like speaking the words that I want to give them, and it has nothing to do with their character arcs and things like that. So I think that that's really important. But I also feel like there's a power in fiction, particularly to inspire children and to teach children, that is not really as impactful with nonfiction. I think we need both.
Yeah, yeah, so true. No, I agree. I I'll be honest. I don't think I read enough fiction growing up, and I think I myself, my children are now. But I want to. It's almost like as an adult, you want to. You just get busy, right? And you start to say, okay, what you fill things in differently, depending. And now with technology and the way we consume content, the way we entertain or have recreation, we're not making that time to stop read, and reading has not been top of the list for people when it comes to recreation or retelling stories. And it is something in us that we are naturally storytellers. Jesus spoke in storytelling. He would constantly give examples through his parables, and he was a master at it to people at the time. So let's rediscover this practice in a big way, but let's not lose our that gift, and do it in a way that is going to inspire people to be more. So let's create that, which is important. Well done.
Thank you. So I also want to share, I know a lot of times people will say, go learn how to do this, but then there's really not any place to kind of go. So I just wanted to touch briefly on some of the things that I've found to be helpful. Kind of first off, I know some people go to school for this. I know in America, one of my friend's nieces is going to JP Catholic, specifically to study creative writing. But I didn't go to school for this. There's a lot of free resources available on YouTube even that are just really helpful. Brandon Sanderson is just like a big shot science fiction and fantasy kind of author, and he teaches a science fiction and fantasy course at Brigham Young University, or BYU, in the States. And he, one of the years, just put all the videos of each class on his YouTube page that anybody can watch for free. There's the Writing Excuses podcast. There's I think I've found that studying kind of like the structure of storytelling is really helpful. But things like how to create sympathetic and compelling characters, how to set up a character arc and pay it off. Like, I think there are tools they're a little bit different that also need to be in a fiction writer's kind of toolkit, rather than just knowing how to construct a compelling sentence to make like a specific nonfiction argument. So I think that's something that I think can be I think that there is a lot of information out there. I'm happy to give you just a list of just even YouTube video links to include in the show notes if people are interested in kind of diving into this more. I will say, a lot of Hollywood's really good at this. I know they're not doing a good job at this precise moment in time, but they have perfected the art of kind of getting as much emotional punch out of a 2-hour kind of film as possible. So things like that are writing or teaching screenwriting can also be helpful for kind of fiction writing. So I like the Story Solution. Eric Edson is a good one. Michael Arndt is a screenwriter. I will say I typically probably would recommend most of these for 18 years old and up. I think older teens could probably do Brandon Sanderson's class, but specifically because a lot of the examples that they use to illustrate like a point that they're making, I can't promise those won't be like an R-rated movie. So something like that. So I'm really not into kind of consuming a lot of material that's offensive. So, but I think as an adult, but I also want to respect parents maybe not want a kid getting exposed to just even the themes that are brought up in some of the content. So, but I think there's a lot out there for free. I think Neil Gaiman is often giving the best writing advice when he says, if you want to be a writer, you should write and you should finish things. but I also think there's an element of practicing with a purpose of practicing something, not just practicing without any structure or any I don't know, I'm not saying this very well. They're not, I think you need to practice the craft well. So you're not practicing kind of, if you were learning a musical instrument, you wouldn't want to practice just scales that didn't mean anything or poor technique or things like that. I think you have to combine both of them.
Yeah, very good. So what you're saying is, with a bit of research, and we'll put the links below, but there is an art to it, there is a structure, there is a process. Almost, would you say it's almost like a storytelling template that people follow, or is it, or at least a way of you can tell a good story from a not so good one? What makes a good story?
So again, I think going back to we're storytelling creatures. I think that this is a very hotly debated topic, but I kind of land on the side where I think there's something about how our psyche as human beings are wired kind of lends itself to we're looking for particular things in a story. Because sometimes people can say that didn't really quite land. They may not be able to tell you like exactly what's wrong with your story or telling me what's wrong with my story. But they can say like, oh, this isn't quite working. Like, and everyone will say this is the particular point that isn't working. So I think there is something like a lot of the writings of Aristotle from thousands of years ago are still very applicable to our storytelling today. So I think there are some kind of lasting, kind of real objective things. I think some of the things, to go back to another like often used quote, the true, the good, and the beautiful is thrown around a lot, and justifiably so. I think those are important things to strive for. One of the things that Bishop Barron really talks about a lot is going back to Father Hans Urs von Balthasar's point where he flipped Kant's order around and put the beautiful first. If anybody's interested, Bishop Barron talks about this a lot. It's very interesting. I think a lot of the things that come out of Word on Fire, I think this is a foundational principle of focusing on the beautiful. But beauty in this sense isn't subjectively pretty. That's not what we mean by beautiful. They're objective things. I think he talks about St. Thomas Aquinas talks about the intersection between wholeness, harmony, and radiance. And so what that means for fiction is that there are rules. And I think that some people are like, oh, I don't want to be formulaic, but I think it's a matter of, for an example, if you want to make a dress or sew a garment, you use like and you want somebody to be able to actually wear it. You would use a mannequin or a model, because you can make whatever kind of dress on it you want. But if you want somebody to be able to wear it, it kind of needs to follow the shape of the human figure. Mary, what is her name? I think her name is Mary Robinette. She talks about like story structure being a container. Like you can put whatever kind of liquid you want in that container, but if you don't use a container at all, and you will just have a puddle and a big mess. So I think these are things that you can, that it's good to learn. It doesn't mean you have to be a slave to them, but it's the kind of a thing that you should break intentionally, not accidentally. If that makes sense.
Love it. No, thank you. I love what you said, and I do want to, as we're out of time here, I do want to talk about this book. It is available on Amazon around the world, but I do want to announce here today that it is also available at parousiamedia.com. So we're very excited to make this available in Australia to those people who want to get a copy at our website on the store. So go to our website, click on store, and we'll have this there. And if you're not yet subscribed to our email, please do so, because we're going to be promoting this again coming up directly after this podcast is released. So please get your copy. The Secret Princess, A Tale of Hope, written by none other than J.C. Prins. So very excited and really encouraging others to read this. So I want to thank you for joining us, J.C. Prins, and thanks for everything you're doing. All the best with the sequel. I hope you reach out to us when that's ready, and we'd love to have that available to our audience. Can I give you just one final word here in closing, if you wanted to, just a bit of inspiration or from you as we close off here?
I would just say that if God is putting a desire to write for our community on your heart, that to encourage anybody that you can do this. And this is something that is very needed in the church. It would be a wonderful gift to our children, but to our entire Catholic community. We need your stories, just of all shapes and sizes. So that's what I would encourage people to write if they have the desire. So.
Well said. Beautiful. And do you, if people want to reach out to you, is there an online?
You can reach out to me through
platform?
my website is jcprins.com. So I'm
Excellent.
not available.
We'll have that up on the screen.
I'm not on social media, but you can reach out to me through my website. I'd be happy to talk with folks and then try and give them
Fantastic.
an encouraging word if they're in need of one. So.
Love it. Awesome. Well, we'll put that on in the description. Well, thank you again for joining us, and God bless you. And we'll be in touch very soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me, and God bless you and listeners in your ministry.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone else for watching. I hope you're inspired by that today. Get your copy, The Secret Princess, The Tale of Hope. This is a beautiful story, available at parousiamedia.com. And thanks again. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please like, comment, share, do what you can with this content and get it out to family and friends. Also on the podcasting platforms as well, share them. And we thank you for your prayers and support. And until next time, God bless.